Thank you, Neha, and good afternoon, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or late good evening to wherever you are joining from different parts of the world. It's a privilege to moderate this panel, and thank you to Vineshilji, Chris, who I see on the screen for organizing this. I thank IFTDO for thinking on this very contemporary topic, and I would also like to thank Mr. Ranjan Mahapatra for inviting me for this session and also assembling this set of panel there. I'm actually joined by an eminent set of panelists. The panel brings in a lot of diversity of professions, experiences, geographies, and industries. In some ways, very unique, and that would enrich the discussion today. Besides, it's a very diverse on gender. So far, so good. Neha has kindly introduced everybody, but to lighten the mood, I'll start off with one thing about each of the panelists, fellow panelists, and which I learned in the last week we have interacted together. So let me start with Amrita. She started her career in private sector, spent bulk of the career in public sector, and then took the public sector private. I think that's like karma completing its full circle. And then Nicole's lived in multiple cities across the globe. Now she finds herself in Tokyo. But I'm sure as the discussion goes, she will leverage her experiences from different cities and geographies into the discussion. And finally, I'll just call him Shah as he's known there. So good, it's a virtual conference. Shah is an expert in martial arts. So if it was a physical conference and you asked him tough questions, you know what will happen. But welcome all. Look forward to the discussion there. As we start, it's interesting. We've learned the digital ways of doing these things. Otherwise, we do these in roomfuls there. But let me just lay out a couple of rules on how we will do this so that we can have an effective session. I would be moderating the panel. I will start off with a quick introduction to the topic, and then we will go around on asking panelists on their views on certain topics there. Audience can pose in the questions on chat, and I will periodically look at the chat and try to bring in the questions. And Neha, if you can help me, if there are questions on chat, you can help me, and you can even email me them separately. I have my email on the second screen. That would be good. We've started bang on time, and I would moderate it such that we finish it on time there. So with that, let me get started. And once again, welcome everybody to this panel. And please make it interactive by posing in your questions. I will, as I said, periodically keep looking at the chats there. Just to set a bit of the context for this particular session, the last 18 months, and I was reflecting on as I prepared my thoughts for the session, the last 18 months have been a disruption in everyone's life, be it on a professional front or even on personal fronts. We haven't seen what we saw in the last 18 months. The world changed on us dramatically. From a globally connected world where we were doing seamless travels around the world, we all got isolated into our homes, into our small studies, into our small rooms, managing all our professional and personal spheres of life from there. From teaming offices, buzzing with activities, we actually Teams became our office. So we spent most of the time on Teams. Zoom won't be very happy because Zoom is being used as the platform here, but I'm using Teams as the surrogate for digital platforms there. So offices got converted into digital platforms. We learned a new way that work could happen remotely. I was speaking to one of my clients who's a chief operating officer for a chemical manufacturing company, used to be traveling to all his clients 25 days a month. And during lockdown, he told me, I have not traveled to a plant for 2 months and the plants are running better than what they were running earlier. So he learned a new way of working there.
I know.
And overnight, the world changed on us in some ways.
Absolutely.
Yet the 18 months showed us the perseverance of human race. We adapted to new ways of working. We changed in our organization's policies and procedures. I remember discussing with Mr. Mahapatra once during the lockdown, and he told me about the innovative policies he was introducing in his organization. So even state-owned organizations worked on very new policies, even around work from home, hybrid working, etc. So everybody adapted to that. And we learned digital ways into our professional and personal life. We incorporated them. In some ways, the pandemic taught us how to work in an agile manner, and we learned very quickly. As consultant, I learned that the typical thing of, oh, I will do a design and then we'll do a pilot and then we will do a launch. Organizations were not going through that path. Some of them were trying to launch things very, very quickly there. In this context, with this background, I think we'll all agree that the theme of this virtual conference, the strategies for an agile work culture, pathways to the new age, is very contemporary. And I compliment IFTDO for picking up a very contemporary topic. That brings me to the theme of the session: technology redefining future of work and workplace. As I just said, we've all seen technology, especially the digital technologies, play an important part in our adaptation to the new ways of working over the last 18 months. Now, in the next 75 odd minutes, 75, 80 minutes, we will deep dive into this aspect and try to bring what it means in different spheres, in different geographies, in different kind of companies there. Let me start with the panelists there. I will invite the panelists to make their opening remarks there, about 3 to 4 minutes each there. Just to tee off some thoughts for them, as I thought of the topic and the questions for the panelists, 3 key questions come to my mind. Is agile work culture more relevant now? Has pandemic accelerated this? And did technology enable this?
Absolutely.
Let me start this by inviting Shah to talk about it. Shah, you are in the management team of one of the largest companies in oil and gas sector, multinational, in a complex sector, and with the complexities of having a front-end business serving customers and yet having assets which need to run 24/7 to give their profitability. Would love your opening remarks, especially focusing on the 3 questions I just articulated.
Thank you, Vikas, and thank you to IFTDO for inviting me here to this conference today. And certainly, it was a well-crafted opening remarks, Vikas. It's we were sent home for Petronas on 18th of March. Tens of thousands were sent home overnight to resume the business that we have entrusted upon us. And it certainly, gives full meaning to shared human condition as throughout the world. We share that particular condition, and here we are today. We are embracing the whole agile and digital way of working. Certainly, the answer to the agile work culture, is it more relevant now? It's even more relevant, and it definitely has been accelerated by the advent of the global COVID-19 pandemic. For Petronas particularly, we were lucky. Over the few years prior to the COVID-19, we put in place significant digital and technology implementation. And we were kind of like somewhat ready when we faced the pandemic. We had to adopt, obviously, remote collaboration platforms, connectivity, cloud, enhancing cybersecurity like everyone else. Adopted digital and analytics solutions, to enhance our visibility across the value chains that we have in order to make seamless decision making. Adopted, obviously, and accelerated digital learning tools to continue the ability to upskill our workforce, be able to democratize some of the development of analytics and digital solutions as well. Not to mention onboarding of new talents throughout the pandemic in a completely virtual way. And myself, I joined this role a few months back, at the height of the pandemic, and I was onboarded virtually as well. Never got to meet any of my colleagues, and as I did my first engagement with my team, it was completely virtual. And just over a few weeks back, when we resumed, coming back to work, did I manage to see everyone in person, and that was an experience, that I've kind of like forgotten how it feels like to be able to interact in a physical environment with our colleagues. But talking about agile, it's not just technology, as technology is just an enabler. At the heart of it is the agile values, culture, and way of working for Petronas. It's even more relevant now as we begin to scale and embrace the whole test, learn, and iterate methodology, and constantly being able to iterate and be able to offer solutions that are continuously to be relevant and valuable to our customers, especially in light of changing consumer trends accelerated by the pandemic. Customer being put at the heart of it, as we kind of like test and iterate solutions for them, putting their urgent and intense need at the focus of it. And at the core of all this are our talents. And we found that the agile teams, work best as leaders trust, empower, and give full support in order for them to be able to continuously provide solutions that are relevant in this changing world, changing business landscape that Petronas is in. Talents continue to be our most valuable assets. It's important that the workforce are equipped with agile way of working to be resilient in managing the changing circumstances. It's really about investing in the people, powering them, enabling them to be able to do more with less, to be able to adapt and make better decisions, so to create sustainable and valuable solutions for our customers. Yeah.
Thanks, Shah, and those were great opening remarks. I'll come back to you next time to dig a bit deeper into how you ran your assets during that time and ran your organization. Let me flip over to Amrita for her thoughts there. And her organization's world stopped immediately on, I think in our case, it was March 23rd, if I remember correctly. I still remember.
Sorry. I'll tell you my story. We did not stop. I've got very interesting story to tell you.
Yes, I will look at it. But
we had Vande Bharat flights.
Lovely. So yes, I should have corrected myself on that. So I leave for Amrita to correct. But for me, the stark reality was when India announced lockdown, the trains stopped, and in India the trains never stopped. Even a couple of times in the previous century when we fought wars, the national trains never stopped. But for a period of time, they stopped. So that was the stark reality there. But let me invite Amrita to share her opening remarks, and I'm sure the interesting story she has to say.
Yeah, whatever you've said, is agile work culture more relevant? I mean, all three are yes. This COVID-19 pandemic has brought in focus, and from HR point of view, it has brought in focus two major winners. One is your human resource and technology, yes. It has accelerated two trends, driving change in digital transformation and the corporate shift to value its manpower resources, isn't it? So technology has affected all the three things. Affected all the three major dimensions of an organization. The work, what work to do, the work itself, the workforce, who does the work, and the workplace where the work is to be done. So it's been it's been a major transition, major transformation, and people have been talking about automation and digitization during Industrial Revolution and how it was very good, how some jobs got obsolete, many more were created. But the difference out here right now was this transition happened very fast. It was very, very fast, and the machines were not replacing, the manual, repetitive, the 3Ds, dull, dangerous, and dirty jobs. But it was replacing total human judgment. AI is fabulous. it can operate you, it can diagnose things, the engineers are getting obsolete. So this whole concept is just too good, especially in aviation. The kind of transition it can make in flying, it can make in everything is amazing. So whatever you're saying, technology as an enabler has been really, really very, very effective during this transition. And I'm talking from a government sector. I'm in India, I'm a public sector. So there are a lot of automation. See, basic automation for an aircraft and all are on. That happens. But from internal processes also, the whole handling of internal process, digitization there. I won't say quite slow. We have to really accelerate that. And that happened in 48 hours. It was amazing how things changed. So it was, whatever you said was just too good. And the best thing right now is that, this lockdown on this pandemic, we should not let it go waste. It has provided a once in a lifetime opportunity for business to really self-reflect, rethink the practices, process, and change them bring the necessary change. And this is the time, even from a public sector point of view, I will say that resistance to change is the lowest, and the building future crisis, that crisis resilience is the highest. So whatever we can do, we can really do it right now. So, it had a very sad effect, but for me, this whole epidemic has been such a big educator. The kind of things I've learned, the kind of work I've done, it's been an amazing ride. Very, very, I had personal losses. I was down with COVID. Everything was quite gloomy around me, but there was such revelations, such amazing experiences that, I don't know, COVID was a major learner, and technology was the enabler there where we could handle it, because all the problems we faced was handled by technology. So technology created many problems in my life, but it handled all the problems too. That is true. And then technology highlighted the fact that, technology will be there. All the aircraft are all everything is perfect in all the organization. But the competitive advantage is only from your human resource. They bring the difference and they act out during crisis. It is the human power that really comes in focus and is very, very effective. So that is my take on these questions. And a big yes to all the sentences that you've made.
Great, Amrita. And like your enthusiasm about learning and self-reflecting, I'm going to come back to these with some more specific questions as we process. But let me invite Nicole, who like me is a consultant, and consultants also learned quite a few things that they could do consulting without traveling, first of all. And technology probably increased our efficiency a lot more than we thought it would increase. But Nicole would welcome your thoughts on the three questions as the opening remarks.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here. Good evening, konbanwa from Tokyo. I would say agile work culture is no longer a choice. It has become an imperative. Over the last 18 months, we've really experienced that we are living in a world of perpetual disruption, where our ability to thrive moving forward is all about our ability to be able to adapt, respond, assume new roles.
Absolutely.
All of this, and we need to be able to embrace a mindset where we actually expect continuous disruption. And it's the agility that gives us the ability to use that continuous disruption as a catalyst to constantly transform and unlock new opportunities and possibilities. And maybe I'll kind of throw a little bit of a different perspective here. I always try to say to myself, I learn the most when things don't go so well. It's not necessarily when things go well. And if I reflect for a moment on the impact of technology and how critical that is to really unleash this agility that we're talking about, and I think about what I've experienced, what we've all experienced here in Japan. Anybody that has followed the media over the last 18 months has probably seen many headlines that say Japan has suffered a digital defeat against the pandemic. They're the actual words that we're hearing again and again. Many organizations in Japan have not been able to bring the agility that they wish they could. They haven't been able to rapidly shift to those new remote ways of working. They haven't been able to do a lot of this quite often because the work that's being done is not able to be done anywhere else but on site. And so we've been in a situation where, not having been at a point where we've got that maturity in the digitalization of work, has actually been a constraint in our ability to bring the agility that we need to respond to the demands that we need to face in this perpetual disruption. And so, I think there's just so much relevance when you bring in the technology lens, the agility lens, and this whole perpetual disruption, a moment we are in with, I think, just incredible choices in front of us to really, really take on new possibilities and aspirations.
Great. Thanks, Nicole, for your opening remarks. Let me move forward and go deeper with each of the three panelists, and I'll draw upon what they had mentioned in the opening remarks there, especially digging some deeper experiences from their organizations. How did they leverage technology? So let me start with Amrita this time. Amrita, we discussed that airlines were grounded with minimal notice. Of course, they took off in your case with Vande Bharat flights later on. How big a shock was it for your organizations? What are some of the immediate steps you took, especially when the lockdown happened, everybody's at home, flights are grounded, and how did you leverage technology to solve some of those problems, the immediate ones for you? We are talking about the immediate response, and I'll come back later to what is happening on the longer term future.
Yeah, I'll tell you in Air India what happened, that even we were going through a bad phase even before that. So we had implemented some cost-cutting endeavors we had taken. So the salaries and all were cut for all my employees. And then 23rd, 24th, isn't it, when the whole lockdown started. But we did not, definitely immediately the reaction was to just take care of employees and their families. So we did that. The first tunnel, when we entered the tunnel, was the action to take care of all the family. But that happened for a week, and somewhere we were just trying to adjust when all the Vande Bharat flights started. It was 8th of May, we had to start all the, in March, we had to prepare for all the Vande Bharat flight. Now here, I have, you talk about technology. Technology helped us a lot. But here, I really want to bring in the mindset of employees, how they reacted to the whole situation. You talk about reacting, how we faced, what happened to us. We didn't know how to react. We were too busy, first of all, handling the COVID, the patient, getting them hospitals, creating COVID centers. And then we were asking them to go home. We are not, as I said, we have to be really technologically, we are not very techno savvy. But overnight, all our systems were replaced. Within 48 hours, my IT department was making, we had about 450 offices all over Delhi itself. We had 450 offices because every house was an office then. So, but all that was okay. But then to have my people who were down with 40% of their salary to go to Wuhan, to China, immediately to go to China was, and what China, we have gone to about 79 destinations in 55 countries, and 37 destinations in 31 countries are new destinations. We have never been there. And when you start a flight, there are a lot of formalities you have to do. There are a lot of interactions you have to do. And there are a lot of testing of the place. It is a nightmare. But we went to 31 countries, 37 destinations. We had never gone before. And my employees, all in the midst of COVID, there was not a single Vande Bharat flight which was denied by any of my crew. The whole experience for me was so good. I can't tell you. I had to be, and all of a sudden it was 10 people. We were wearing all the hats possible. We were CFO of the company, we were head of the company, operations head, commercial head. There were 10 people who was running the whole organization. So it was a different experience and then you realize how leadership comes in and how we have not realized the leadership of my middle management. This hierarchy thing should go. It is just then you realize that the organization should be flat, and then you will know who is doing what. This crisis brought up many stars in my company, many people who went out of the way to work, and there were many people who are very senior but did not want to work. So understanding my workforce was so revealing. Anyway, the whole Vande Bharat flight is still on, and we have done about 3.9 million people. So, and here I think more that even your top management did not know. It was such a new experience, Nobody knew how to handle the whole situation, how to take care of their family, how to have COVID center, how to have people hospitalized. And my doctors, we have few doctors here, but they didn't know how to handle everybody. Consulting people on phone, and there were 10, 15 of us. We had a list of immediately what to do. So when we used to receive the call and get somebody sick, we used to call them up and say, immediately you do this, and then we'll take you forward, because the doctors were not available to really take care. And thankfully, all my flying crew, except for a few pilots, all my flying crew who are in direct touch with all the customers, we did not lose anybody. They were all, they had problems. We had to take care of. They're coming back, and they never wanted to go back home to infect all the other family members, to how to make place for them. So the two major learning that I got, that mindset of people, that human resource that we have in any crisis, technology can be there, anything else can be there, but unless I have a proper human resource who has the culture to help out. See, Air India has been in this culture. We always have that for any rescue operation, be it Kuwait evacuation. We have been doing that. So this mindset of people coming out in crisis was a major revelation and a major education for us. And it's a major applaud. They were not called frontline warriors, but they were not less than that. We have gone to Wuhan, we went to all the, peak period, we went to all the purely infected places and brought back people with all the interaction. We had commercial people handling them. And all this happened when the top management, there were only 10 people handling the whole operation. When we have about 1,000 people handling the whole operation, there were just 10 people. So, and the advantage of having a very flat organization where a manager can give you direction and expertise can be taken from anybody, and reaching out to people, it was a great experience. I don't know. I can write a book on what all happened. Kuwait, when there was a Kuwait evacuation, that was supposed to be the biggest evacuation. I said, I'm going to sit and write a book on how we did that. And now after this, I think COVID will be another. I think there'll be many books written on COVID. I'm quite sure of that. But it was a great experience. And we realized the importance of investing in HR, sure. And how HR and technology, how they merge beautifully together. If you have a strong technology, if you have a strong mindset, skilled people, you don't need anything else. You don't need anything else, frankly. You will sure. Take off. Yes.
Sure. No, I think that's great thoughts, Amrita. And three things stuck to me as I was listening to your responses on this question. First, agility starts with human resilience. You talked about how resilient people were doing, keeping personal challenges aside and doing that. Second, multiple roles, multitasking, which is essentially is a bedrock of agility. And third, giving leadership at different levels and flat organizations. So these could be the starting points for anybody who's starting to think about bringing greater agility into the organization. Sure.
I want to add two more. One is communication, the way you talk, and the empathy people have for everybody. The two more learnings I have: resilience, agility, leadership you touched, and communication and empathy. These are the HR part that was also a major talent, which was really of major use during this time.
Great. Thanks, Amrita. With that, let me bring in Shah. His assets were not flying, but he was supplying the fuels to keep the flights going in his countries. But Shah, as I looked at it, and I spent a lifetime consulting in your industry, so I track that quite closely. Less Amrita's industry, actually. But in your business, there were double challenges. Parts of it needed to run. Your refineries need to run because that provides the fuel for keeping the economies going there. Your ships and all need to run to transport the fuels. Yet you were not even certain how much the demand would be. How do you store the things? And you don't have infinite place to store. Your tankages are full. Then what do you do there? So these were kind of challenges, I'm sure, which were unprecedented given the dimensions of those challenges there. Would love to hear your thoughts on how did your organization cope with it? What aspects of agility did you guys bring into that entire thing? And maybe how did you, in the short term, how the technology helped you on those points?
Sure, Vikas. And Amrita, I was just listening intently to some of your quotes. I might borrow some of those quotes. They were very apt. They were very sharp indeed. Vikas, to your question, it's an interesting one for us as an integrated energy solutions provider. We were kind of like hit by almost like a two-prong challenges. On the shorter term, nearly in the past nearly 2 years, as we are hit by the pandemic, and it brought about global movement restrictions. We saw global consumption severely restricted, and global markets severely affected as well. And on the other hand, for us, on the longer term, we are embracing the accelerated energy transition as Petronas move into offering cleaner, greener, and sustainable energy solutions. So for an organization like us, we kind of like see these two sides of the the focus to the organizations right now. On one hand, we kind of like broadly term it as perform, the need to kind of like continue with running the businesses that we know so well. And these are businesses where, we are very familiar. The methodology are very repeatable, and moving into delivering it in a safe, reliable, and an efficient manner with a good degree of predictability behind it. And on the other hand, we are needed to, in a very simple term, transform. And as we move into new, uncharted, in some areas, positions and areas. And the kind of like archetypes and characteristics of this transform are pretty different than the perform side of things. Strong anchor on changing customer preferences, strong anchor on customer simplicity, the need to embrace the agile methodology as we are discussing today, constantly test, learn, and iterate in order to find solutions with a high degree of variability. And this is where I like where one of Rita's your quotes, HR and tech needed to come together. As an organization, we need to kind of like balance between these two perform and transform sides. Our teams, talents, leadership, operating model need to be able to be ambidextrous in managing the two sides, which are very different. And the implications for us is, we need to adopt culture that are able, that can enable us to perform as well as transform, culture that allows for innovation, culture that allows for high degree of customer simplicity, empowerment, and adaptability, as well as operating model, which means processes and systems that can be conducive and optimum for each. No longer do we see there is a one-size-fits-all processes like budgeting or procurement. We needed to adapt in order to allow for the both sides of perform and transform to thrive. Leadership at the heart of it needs to be ambidextrous as well, as leaders need to balance both priorities on perform and transform, and the values that are applicable to both. So this is our observation in terms of what we are facing over the past 2 years in the global pandemic, as well as in the broader accelerated energy transition as we embrace becoming a sustainable energy and solutions provider.
Great. Thanks, Shah, and lovely thoughts there. I think the need for operating model, need for leadership, and need for processes to be ambidextrous is something very nicely put across. That becomes one of the other bedrocks for introducing agility into any organizations. With that, let me bring in Nicole. Nicole, I was very intrigued with your opening remarks where you said the Japanese organizations got defeated in some ways. That's quite contrarian to what most of us would think about it. I work a lot with my Japanese colleagues, but I never thought of it in this fashion there. Japanese organizations are actually known for their disciplined report. Would love to go deeper onto why did you make those comments and share some observations around it, and how do you see them now adapting, and did they do the things differently from what Amrita and Shah were just mentioning? I would love to have your thoughts.
Yes, so as I mentioned, earlier on, the digitalization imperative has absolutely been the focus. I don't think we would find an organization in Japan that hasn't doubled down on accelerating their digital transformation and at the same time focusing on all of that upskilling and reskilling around digital skills and capabilities. Because if you put it in context, yes, we're needing to actually accelerate where we're at on the maturity curve, and so that means we also don't have those digital skills and capabilities. And of course, with what's been happening around the world with COVID, border closures, we can't rely on foreign talent. So I think what we had really noticed is that this whole just almost exclusive focus, like this understanding of the urgency. Also keep in mind, we have never locked down. So we were still on the trains commuting 90 minutes each way. We were still, taking those dinner breaks at restaurants. There was no lockdown. I mean, an interesting data point for you, 83% of organizations did not allow their people to work remotely during the pandemic. Now, that was not necessarily because they didn't want to. It comes back to what I said earlier. It was because they didn't have that technology enablement, that digitalization that they needed. There was a data point that even shocked me. I read in January, 93% of organizations in Japan don't just use fax machines, but rely on them. So put all of this into perspective, even for those workers that could work remotely, they had to go into the office each day to stamp and sign documents. And so all of these things were going on. The other dynamic that I think is really telling about our magical Japan culture, we really saw this focus on client centricity. What we kept hearing again and again and again was workers saying, I don't want my manager to tell me what the rules are. I need to serve my client. And some of my clients want me to be there in person. Some of them don't want me to be. They're at different points in their digital maturity, in their ability to adapt. And so there was this real dilemma for a lot of workers where they just wanted to be empowered to serve their client and to adapt to what their client needed. We also have the dilemma in Japan where our housing isn't built. A lot of places don't even have a kitchen. And so, even for people that could work remotely, that they actually weren't able to, they didn't have the facilities. And so even people that could work remotely, they were in the office because they needed those facilities. And so, all of these dynamics at play, when you also put it into the perspective of the talent and skills crisis that we're facing, what this has meant is that those organizations that are embracing technology, accelerating their digital transformation, and are able to offer employees these remote ways of working, they've now got a very differentiated employer brand in the market. So this is becoming a strategic differentiator for organizations to really attract, engage, and develop the talent they need right now. So yeah, you can see sort of, I guess the other final thing I would add that I often don't appreciate enough is if you think about Japan is flawless in execution, executes to perfection. There is a process and we know that process, we rely on it, absolutely brilliant. We don't have a culture where it is necessarily instinctive to throw the rule book out and actually improvise. You know, all of those things where we have seen brilliance over the last 18 months around the world, there quite often been moments where we've thrown out the rule book and been surprised at what's possible. And so there's also been, you know, this necessary tension, even internally, you know, in terms of how do I actually get comfortable? You know, I don't necessarily know and understand how to improvise. And so, yeah, I guess a few different dynamics there, you know, to Sharan and Amrita.
I think this was very enlightening for me. I must say I had never thought of it in this fashion, where the culture which, even the working culture, which was the pride in some ways, could be caught out by the pandemic. So one additional learning to the notes I was taking was that you don't need to build in agility onto only the 5 points Amrita mentioned or the couple of points about ambidextrous which Shah added, but you also need to build in agility into your infrastructure. So if you don't have fax machines, you need to figure out how to do without the fax machine or the kitchens you mentioned.
Throw out the fax machines.
Yes, it's been ages since actually I used the fax machine. In fact, now you use this nice softwares on your mobile phones, which convert them into nice PDFs and send it across.
Yeah.
With that, let me move on. Sorry, Nicole, you were adding something.
You can imagine the whole contracting process. You cannot execute a contract without either a signature, or we have a special stamp that's called a hanko that many people will be familiar with. So no contracts at all could be executed. And so, you know, it's really created this whole debate that actually isn't settled. And I think that the feeling is the hankos will survive. But yeah, you can imagine like the contracting process is at the heart of business. It's the heart of the economy, you know, to not be able to execute a contract and, you know, has just been fascinating to see it all play out.
Yeah, I'm sure Amrita would have examples of how, and being a state-owned organization, whether it is Air India or Indian Oil or others, you have to follow a regimented process. But at least we saw many of the state-owned organizations being so flexible in how they went around with these things that, you know, the Henko equivalents were thrown out and said, okay, we can live with it, or we can regularize it in a different fashion. I'm sure if you want to throw in an anecdote or two there, Amrita, would be helpful to hear from you. On
yeah,
how
you know, this is the first time we realize that, you know, all the restrictions that we have, if you do away with it, they're very simple problems made so complicated. Isn't it? Everything can be handled by very simple things. And then, you know, the other thing that I want to talk about the technology is that, you know, technology can be matched across. So again, coming from an HR person, the competitive advantage you get is from human resource mindset, you know, how he thinks, how he handles the situation. And this again, COVID pandemic brought us such out of the box ideas in handling a situation, handling a visa, you know, from international visa for the crew, how it was handled. There's a lot of story. I can't even talk so openly about that. But how we handled, how everybody came up with their own ideas is just that the restriction that is there otherwise, the process which is there otherwise, those restricted processes were let loose. Everybody was having a close eye to all the issues that was arising. But then it is not that the process, the action taken was bad, corrupt, incorrect in any way. It was quick, it was faster, it was agile, the word that you use. And this is what COVID has taught us, that things can be, you don't have to think one way always, the processes can be mended to suit you.
Good.
And then the other thing that I want to talk about COVID is that, that question has not come. I'll wait for my chance. Sorry, I talk a bit too much.
No, it's just lovely hearing your thoughts there, Amrita. Let me move on to the next theme. We have talked about how organizations reacted in the short run. Let me move the ball crystal gazing towards the future there. What are organizations doing to embed the change? Is it something which will be forgotten so soon? Or is it something we are going to embed and institutionalize the agile way of working? Yes, we were all very agile because as they say, necessity is the mother of all invention. So it was necessary. We converted that to very fast. Will we fall back to our own ways? Or will we look at different ways of working? There's much talked about hybrid working model, much talked about embedding technology onto this. So I want all the panelists to crystal gaze for the future and especially talk about, will agile ways be embedded into your organizations or the organizations you work with? And will technology have a role to play with it? So let me flip the order around and let me bring the consultant in the first there. So Nicole, I'm just going to quote a statement you made on the call when we were doing the other day. You cannot view an old map to explore the new world. The new world is here onto us. And I thought that statement was very profound in many ways. Do you see technology as the new map? And how do you see your clients leveraging this? And again, you've had worked with clients across the globe. So you've shared some of the Japanese experience. Maybe you can share some experiences from some other geographies also. Would love to hear your thoughts on this topic.
Yes, that has come from a wonderful, statement from Albert Einstein, such wise words, as relevant, as important as ever. And I use that statement almost every day right now because I say, this isn't just a new world of work that's about accelerated change. It's about so much more than the accelerated change. It's a completely new and different world. And so we need to create the new maps and the new mental models. I would say those new maps and mental models, they need to be laser focused on the human dimension, which I think we keep hearing again and again and again. We need to humanize workforce, workplaces to be able to unleash, our greatest untapped asset is human potential. Having said that, to do that, we need to create the new combinations of humans collaborating with technology, where we're using the technology to enable, to elevate those human capabilities. So as our human workers can stand on the shoulders of the technology and unlock new value, new outcomes, aspirations that have never, ever before been possible. And if we think about what we've seen over the last 18 months in what we've achieved with technology, as we've been hearing, the technology we've been using, in many cases, it's been here, for a long time or a short time, but it's been here. The differentiator has been what we have done as humans, embracing the technology, the usage, the adoption, and so I think we have spent the last decade focusing on the importance of technology in the future of work. I believe we are in, I think it is I think it's ServiceNow CEO, he has said, we're in a human moment. I believe there is a moment right now where there's recognition we need to shift our focus and focus on the importance of humans in the future of work. And with that, bring that technology to create those new opportunities, aspirations. If you look at markets like, for example, China, where they've got a very mature digital society and economy, think of what we can achieve, by using that digital infrastructure. And one thing that, on this note, one thing that excites me about Japan actually is our worker protections really ensure that we are focusing on the human technology collaboration and not focusing on using technology to replace humans, because our work protections make it very difficult, if not impossible, to make somebody redundant. So in Japan, where we do see, that digitalization and these human machine combinations, they're really meaningful, valuable new work outcomes, and so I think, you also look at, for example, Singapore's an amazing market as well, where there is an incredible startup ecosystem, where there's government infrastructure to promote, and really elevate the investments and the support. And so I really think that's the future ahead of us. If we can unlock that collaboration, because we've been investing in technology for a decade, but have a look, the productivity has stagnated or lagged, the well-being of workers, the burnout of workers. And so despite all of those investments, we haven't unlocked the opportunity of technology. And I think that's where we need to flip it on its head. Rather than sitting in a boardroom talking about what technology investments we're going to make, we need to talk about where are the potential, the capabilities of our workforce, and what do we need to do to get the right technology stack to be able to unleash that potential. So do I think the maps are about the tech? Well, not directly. I think it's the human dimension, but of course, unleashing that human dimension needs, that collaboration.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. And really exciting examples you give, and the China example particularly around how they have already leveraged digital into many facets of their life, both working and actually even on the personal side. That's a fascinating one. Let me draw in Amrita for her comments next. Amrita, airline industry has always relied a lot on technologies. Flying planes are most complex technological things. Even customer relationship management, booking tickets online, all those kind of things, that has been done for ages there. So I would say the front end of your business was technology enabled for a long period of time. You alluded earlier to leveraging technology more in the internal ways of working, and even the fact that your organization and many others were slower on those aspects. As you crystal gaze for the future, do you see that becoming an important part embedded in the way you are working? And of course, your organization is going to go through a massive transformation in 2 months from now. So that itself will drive it. But even if you talk about status quo, do you see it crystal ball gazing for future technology being leveraged a lot more internal ways of working? And how do you see it being embedded?
Yeah. If I just want to continue from what my panelists just said, that digitization is to augment HR performance and not to substitute it. So, and there's one thing very, which you said right now, my outside, my machines, my everything is the same, and they are good. But my internal processes do need a lot of digitization. But thank God, because, digitization, but you have to upskill them now. All of a sudden, we realize the kind of digitization we were harboring on and we were trying to implement is outdated. We need something different right now, There are a lot of, now that we are transiting into a company who's highly digitized and is going to set up a new system altogether, in a way, it's good that, my people are going to be, they don't need to be retrained majorly because they'll be trained to a new system altogether. And the system that we were following all this while, and there was it was not so fully functional, will not hamper my new step forward. And secondly, there's one thing that digitization, again, it has, the whole process has to have a organizational mindset. We've been having a few CEOs who were my CMDs who were very for digitization. So it happened for 2 years. There was another leadership which was not for digitization. It stopped. But the whole process, it only implementing this technology, just implementing it does not work at all. It has to be embedded. The people have to appreciate the advantages of digitization, and it has to be internalized. That is what we have been saying. We can't just force it on them, great technology, and expect it to be implemented. We had SAP and all doing rounds here, but it's not that it really served its purpose. So the whole thing is that the mindset of people have to change. It has to be a pride to adopt a new technology. Should be something of a pride. They should say, oh, we have this also. We do it this way. So the whole thing has to be, the company-based culture has to be developed for adoption of this technology, and to take it forward. Then the people will be interested in upskilling them, because it's a continuous process. Whatever you have for 5 years will not be relevant next 5 years. So the whole concept is not just having a mind-blowing technology implemented or introducing it, unless all the employees are really, their mindset is changed to adopt it, to appreciate it, and to understand the advantages of us. Especially now, in this perennial workforce that we have, with the Z generation coming in, and we have one of 80s, and people still of 60s are still working. With this kind of generation, you call it a perennial generation, it is all the more important that the technology, which to have a relationship between your Z generation and your old generation, it's very important that technology becomes a way of thinking. You start, first of all, appreciating the advantages. It becomes a culture in your organization. And here, it is, again, is just to augment the HR performance of an employee. They should not feel that they're being replaced. They should, and it's also very good, you don't have to do all the boring and dull and dangerous work. They are now being, like, see, in my HR also, if all my processes, the simple process, recruitment and all is done in a digitized way, people have time to be more human and take up activities which is more human and which can really give employees satisfaction. So my point take here is that it's good. It is, technology is there. It has to be there. You cannot not have. There's no issue. There's no question of going to the old normal. It has to be a new normal, and the new normal is with technology, is assisted with technology. And the whole crisis will go waste. Yeah, it's such a global crisis. We have to make best of what we have got, and the only way to make best is to go forward and think forward, and take the whole to appreciate what we have learned, and to make sure that we don't fall in this trap ever again. We had so many crises. Mars prepared us. Now they're saying COVID has prepared us for something worse. We can say COVID has made us immune to anything worse which is going to come forward. So that should be the learning that we should take forward. And yes, technology is something that we need to imbibe, to accept, to appreciate, and to enhance our capability, upskill ourselves, make ourselves more superior workforce. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Amrita. Before I bring in Shah, I just wanted to put a message to the audience. If you have any questions, please raise them on chat. And I see some of the senior colleagues on the phone. Mr. Gautam, Chris, Mr. Mahapatra, if you have any questions, I'll bring you after Shah answers this particular question. Shah, let me make the question more specific to you. You are one of the large global organizations in an asset-intense industry, and of course, having one of the biggest ground changes around itself in form of energy transition there. How do you see technology being leveraged more, crystal gazing into the future, in making yourself agile and making yourself respond to what's happening and changing in your business?
Well, if the pandemic has anything that taught us, as we kind of like reflected the past 18 months or so, is the strategic use of technology, particularly digital technology, in achieving our business goals. And that's primarily from, from our reflection, two areas. One is data, in terms of how voluminous data is. Number one, how important that we have access to the data in a timely manner. And thirdly, and more importantly, is how we get the right insight from the data. And certainly digital and the democratization of access to this data and the employment of the various analytics solutions and tools really help a lot, especially when tens of thousands of people are sent remotely. And they had to rely on access of such data in order to continue to not only perform in the existing business, but continues to transform in light of the pandemic challenges and energy transition. We have also learned particularly during the pandemic, the opportunities in terms of democratizing to the population of Petronas in adopting or developing their own analytics. And I think through the program that was introduced called the Citizen Analytics, we had managed to cover about 2,000 staff, and they can easily learn how to do simple analytics too, how to access data, and how to put up a simple thing like a dashboard that is very interactive, insightful, that allows for real-time access of various data and be able to glean insight out of it. So the data coupled with the collaborative platform, connected platform, enable us to really be able to continue and operate our business in terms of continuously to achieve our results during the pandemic. The other aspect that we've seen as an opportunity as well, particularly as an organization that strives to be ambidextrous, we are still a long ways to go on that curve in balancing perform and transform, is to put in place several building blocks around that agile enterprise. The first one is obviously around leadership. Again, I really like Rita's quote on hierarchy has to go. In our organization, we have this term called HIPPO. It's not the animal kind, but it's an acronym that stands for highest paid person's opinion. And in a transform environment, that has to go, and typically leadership, being experienced engineers, marketers, and accountants tend to prescribe solutions, but in an environment that's agile and empowering and iterative and transforming, the need for leaders to play a role where nobody else sit, and that's a role where they create a very conducive environment for innovation. They are empowering, they unblock impediments to allow for teams to go on and create solutions that delight the customers. Which brings me to the second point of teams and the need to kind of be able to equip them with the right methodology. And in this case, especially during the pandemic, we learned that and we managed to accelerate some scaling of agile and innovation methodology that equip some of our innovation and agile teams to be able to kind of keep up with the various changing consumer trends out there. And lastly, obviously, I talked about the operating model, but it's also about the culture and mindset that allow us to be to put customer at the center of everything that we do. No longer are we in an era where we sell what we produce. We needed to kind of ensure that we understand the various requirements, needs, and pains of our customers in order to be able to serve them better. And I like also Nicole's quote on being comfortable to improvise. And as culture is something that we have begun to adopt in terms of culture that allow us to learn, celebrate the learning, and continuously to grow and innovate.
Thanks, Shah. Very Very well-rounded views there, and interesting to see how you guys are thinking about this, especially in midst of what is changing in your industry. I have one more round of questions for the panelists, which is a lot more personal there. But before that, let me stop. I don't know how if there are any responses. Neha, if you see any responses on chat, I can't see any, but let me see if Mr. Gautam, Chris, or Mr. Mahapatra, if you have any questions for the panelists. Mr. Gautam, can you unmute, please? Sorry, you are on mute, Mr. Gautam.
I began lightheartedly saying we will save the sticky ones till after the session. But considering that the audibility had screened that one out, I'll withdraw that question as the universe talking to me. What I would like to know is the splendid sojourn which all four of you have had over what is at the best an unknown terrain. Where do you see the millennials in it? As you know, I have spent a substantial part of my life in academia. I've been in the corporate world, consulting world, cooperatives, what have you. And I found the millennials' role in each segment very, very different. What I found them in the classroom, I didn't find them in the corporate world. And I don't want to name organizations. In the corporate world, they are very, very aspirational. And they have very, very graduated opinion of their superiors. Whereas in the academic world, they're far more easy to handle. I don't want to monopolize my perceptions on it, but if you could help me to get a feel of what four of you think about the role of the millennials in taking this forward so far as technology redefining the future of work is concerned, because it touches them more than anyone else.
Sure. A great question, Mr. Gautam. And let me, who wants to go first? Nicole, shall I invite you first? Quick thoughts on this?
Actually, it is such a timely question because it's only a couple of months ago that we did some research on the evolving worker-employer relationship in a post-pandemic world. And it really is absolutely on point with your question. The first thing I would say is, I think when we look across the generations, there are more similarities than we realize. And in fact, what we see is the diversity in what is important is really at an individual level. And I'll just mention very quickly what we came to learn in our research. So we looked at 4 possible futures. They're not exhaustive, they're illustrative, but just to give you an idea, one is a future that we call work is work, where both the workers and employers rely on each other for work-related needs, but they both fully expect that workers are going to find meaning and purpose largely outside of their work. I think that future is becoming more and more prevalent, especially right now, what we're seeing in parts of the world around the Great Resignation. One of the other futures is a war between talent. That's more prevalent when we're getting a high talent supply. And we've got employers that are saying, look, I can easily replace my talent. There's a great supply. I can use technology. I can just focus on reducing my labor costs. And so workers are more interested in what do I need to do to upskill, reskill, all those things. The other future that is fascinating right now is the work as fashion. So this is where we've just got talent saying, I'm just going to chase the best benefits, no matter what they are. That's what I care about right now, self-gratifying. And if you've got a low talent supply and you've got employers just saying, well, we'll do whatever we want, we're going to follow the competitors, we're going to just do what we need to get the attraction and approval, then the other future that everybody thinks is the dominant future is purpose unleashed. There's a bit of a perception that purpose is everything and we all want to, work where there's meaning and a greater purpose. Now, yes, we probably find more of that younger generation more interested in working for an organization where that's really important. But in fact, only around 50% of the workforce are looking for that type of environment. And so I guess my message here is we need to recognize that whether we're just talking about, you know, a particular segment of the workforce or overall, the diversity that we need to manage, we need to be really mindful that we've got a variety of individuals in our workforce that are all looking for something very different, and right now are reevaluating what's important to them. And so I think what we need to work out is, I mean, we've heard things about how do we make sure we've got the data that we need to be able to understand, how do we have the leadership capabilities to be able to have open and honest conversations about what happens, you know, what is important to you, how do we adapt our HR models so as we can create different adaptable ways of, you know, creating the right packages, if you like, for people. So I think, yes, we're probably seeing the younger generation looking more for wanting to focus on the things that are important to them outside of work than at work. We're probably seeing that there's more of an inclination that purpose is important. But I think we've got to be careful that, in fact, it's becoming more and more personalized than we've ever seen before.
Great. Amrita, Shah, any quick thoughts from your side?
You know, I am from an organization where my average age is 50. So I don't have really major input on that. My flying crew are there in the millennial age. And the only thing I can talk about right now, I mean, it's the first time I'm thinking about, you know, talking to them as a group. I've never thought them of mentioning them as a group. It's a very, very interesting question that has come. Now I will think about what the millennials are thinking, and going forward next year, I'll be able to give you more inputs because we'll have more millennials that time now. Right now, we don't have much, but there's one thing there, which is the COVID time, what we realized that our middle management, whatever, I won't call them millennials, they're still in the 70s born, yeah, most of them. They came up with I mean, like youngsters, you know, we are used to thinking in a particular way. These kids have got ideas which have never been appreciated below, which were not very process minded, not very, you know, and it does not have so much restrictions, but they come up with out of the box thoughts. That is true, very true, and they are very impatient. You say that this has got such problem. He said, "You asked me, so I had told you. You know, you go ahead." So they have that impatience around. But I mean, I don't know. I don't really believe, really not very conversant with the thought of generation gap. You know, I remember my great grandmother also talking about, you know, ये आजकल के बच्चे ऐसे हैं, you know, they are so hot headed, they are so independent. This was my great grandmother talking, you know, and then my grandmother also spoke the same, and we also talk the same. It's just that I feel that all generation, they go through that hormonal changes and they have that way of reacting to situations, which is there. So, I mean, I can't really distance out. People normally say that these kids are very impatient. They are used to, they have that, what do you call it? I don't know what to express. They have that, you know, they own it. They know all, that kind of expression, which I think when I was at that age, I also thought the same way. You know, so every generation, I feel, I mean, and the next year when I have more millennials working for me, or I'm working for more of millennials, I'll have a better thought on that.
Great. Shah, any quick thoughts from your side?
Yeah, just quick one. I mean, you know, millennials form almost core of our innovation teams as talents, and what I personally have found, that a recipe to a successful innovation team, you know, on top of this methodology and leadership support and all that, talents that are diverse, and Nicole touched on that. Diversity is very key, not just in terms of the, you know, genders and age, but interests, passion, backgrounds, beliefs, you know, and interests and hobbies, right? Coupled with the passion, and we found that inherently these recipes for good talents in a successful innovation team, a lot of it is concentrated in the younger millennial groups. Coupled with, for us as a company, the opportunity of these millennials is that they form this new demographic generation out there. And before we kind of like go out and do customer ethnography or customer validation, these form very good focus groups internally as well for us. So that's certainly an opportunity that we seize a lot of times.
Great, thanks. And Mr. Gautam, I'll give 30 seconds of two quick responses to that. On technology side, your question had two parts, technology and what's happening now. On the technology side, I see a lot of adoption, lot faster, understandable, and getting embedded, and the need and the ability to challenge the technology fronts. So that's one aspect of millennials. The second, I think in the pandemic era, I see a lot more detachment from, many of the millennials have got sort of a distant from their organizations in some ways. They have become more self-oriented, self-centered because they have too many other things to play with. They don't think, they have not been long enough in the organizations to think about them. So I find a lot, the distance is increasing. And as Nicole also mentioned earlier, we are seeing globally a lot of churn around that entire thing. So hopefully that gives you four diverse opinions on your question.
Allow me to just spin in another thought, because when you have such a splendid group of people discussing, the number of questions unanswered are going to be as many as the number of questions answered. Sure. What I have found as a distinguishing feature of the millennials is their exposure is much wider than what we had when we were at that age. And without being judgmental, innocence has been reduced in its span, and they are far more informed and whatever else you would want. And that, I think, is a huge challenge to the generation ahead of them.
Got it. No, good thoughts, Mr. Gautam. Let me invite Chris for one quick question. We'll try to have one or two panelists respond to your question, Chris.
Thank you, Vikas. Thank you, and Amrita and Nicole and Shah. It's an absolute pleasure to be listening to you today. You're just so enlightening. Could we get an extension of a half an hour on your time? I think we'd all enjoy it. I don't think that'll happen. But my question is, and Vikas, you gave me the platform to ask the question. You set the tone with your introductory speech. You said that, 18 months ago, all our lives was totally disrupted, both professionally and personally and all that. And then you said, that we changed, we adapted, and we learned digital ways. Now, the discussion that you're having is technology redefining the future of the work and the workplace. But one word you said that stands out for me, and it's a concern that I personally have from my own experience, and that is isolation. So at what cost is technology taking over and technology redefining the ways we work and the workplace? And I'm not talking about IT costs or technology costs. I'm talking about human costs. And Dr. Tanvia Gautam, in her address yesterday, clearly stated the need to reach out and ask for help. And her tone, there was an underlying there that this is coming down to hit us in like bigger than COVID ever hit us, I believe. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. Great question, Chris. And this actually was the very similar to the last question I was wanting to ask. I would make it.
Sorry, I read your notes.
I want to make it very personal around this and embed your question there. I'll ask each of the panelists to spend maybe 1 minute each so that there is some time for me to summarize it in the end. Answering Chris's question and also giving your own personal thoughts on what are you liking and disliking about the ways of working. The reason I'm embedding the questions, I expect your own things to bring one of the answers, and I'll end with my thoughts also. So let's start with Amrita. I'll request you to keep it very brief. We are running out of time.
Yeah, what I like or dislike, I don't have anything to categorize that I'm liking it or I'm disliking it. I am just enjoying, I'm just going with the moment. And the isolation part that I have not experienced isolation because we have never been isolated. We have been working throughout. We never had, and work from home was also more or less gone. So that part is not there, but it's just that I feel like a changed person after this. I had personal losses. I lost people. I lost my own family members. But even after that loss, I mean, the amount of, the time I spend, the time I got with I'm just going personal here. I'm not talking about office. I'm going personal. Personally, I feel I am a different person out of this tunnel that I've come out. We thought it's going to be a slow walk, but this marathon that happened, it has changed my perception about everything. And I don't want to go back to the old normal. I just want to go forward with the new normal. And I mean, I really feel that the cost that everybody has paid for this crisis should not go in waste. But I have one thing that I really, you must have heard about the T-shape learning. It's a very common these days, you know, that Walter, what's his name? Walter, he has done that wings, that you talk about wings. I really resonate with his thoughts, you know. He talks about T-shaped learning. One is within your what it's called, work and industry related learning that you do, which goes as a horizontal base and it goes beyond, and you go to upskill yourself, go on learning yourself. That is there. But the best part about, he talks about the wings, the horizontal one. And these wings are your own human revolution, your own development, self-development, your creative thinking, your self-assessment, your time, the way you develop, you go internally and improve yourself. And this wings, he calls this work and industry neutral growth skills. This wings gives you the wings to go through any problem. And I realized this during this COVID. You know, once you develop yourself, once you strengthen your inner strength, you develop your wings, and this wings takes you sky high. So this has this is all I've learned from the whole thing. And that first, for my main learning was never stop learning. You know, you never got, I'm 50 plus, but I want to upskill myself. I've got lots to learn, everything about your work, about you, whatever you do. Develop your wings, you know, develop your thoughts, how you want to fly high and how you want to have your attention management, your self-management, your creativity to take you wherever you are, you know, to fly. And then third is the mindset, to have that mindset to help you go through everything. That should take you forward. And my learning was, I have to develop my wings to go forward much more.
Great.
That will take me through any such crisis in future. And I just want to develop everybody's, you know, as an HR head of my company or in the board, I just want to develop everybody's wings so that they come out of this crisis forever, every time they're faced. That's my take on the whole thing.
Thanks. And quick thoughts from you, Shah and Nicole.
Positive for me, obviously being at home, I on top of learning that I'm a bad bonsai, horticulturalist, because I have a lot of plants die on me. I learned a lot about my kids, spending time with them. I know what TV programs they like to watch, little things that I never got to know because I'm at work. Negative other than I guess contributing to the e-commerce at my expense is perhaps what Chris was asking, right? And the missing part of that social and team interaction. I find it that the kind of power behind when you are in a room in a meeting, having a very difficult conversations or having very challenging meetings, a smile can actually bring the mood down, and we don't necessarily get that from a virtual environment. Yeah, but that's my personal takeaway.
Lovely.
Yeah,
Nicole.
So I absolutely love the way that COVID has given me the opportunity to reevaluate what's important, and in particular, really encouraged me to build capability around being very intentional about where I'm working, how I'm working, what I'm doing with my work. So as I'm a lot more aware of this piece of work. I'm going to do this remotely. I'm going to be more focused, more comfortable, more productive. I'm going to save that commute time and give that to my family and be really intentional and a lot more strategic in how I use my on-site time. You know, I'm finding I've always loved being with people, but I'm finding we're getting a lot more meaning and value out of those interactions. In terms of what I'm not enjoying, and I think this probably is quite on point with Chris's question, I am really not enjoying the way that the speed is getting faster and it's not going to slow down. That means there's a huge challenge to make sure we're building the new capabilities that we need to thrive. Now, in particular, the big capability that I lose sleep over most every day with the work I do with clients and myself is inclusive leadership. If you think about flexibility, flexibility is chaos if you don't have inclusive leaders to work out how do we actually empower our people to embrace this flexibility in a way where we've got trust and confidence that we can all work in a way that's going to really bring our best as individuals and as a team. And to give you a quick example, Australia are reported as the most productive work from home country. But last week I read a report that said there was a study done on 26 countries and they were at the bottom in terms of stress and burnout. So how do you reconcile that? Is that productivity really true? It's exactly what you're saying, Chris, you know, and one of the things that I found fascinating with the work I'm doing with clients, they're now talking to me about, we're thinking that we want to add to our executive team a psychologist, a chief, mental health officer, these types of roles that are all about this focus on the isolation, the burnout, the blur between work and life. And so I think they're the things that I'm not enjoying, that it's easy not to pay attention because they are capabilities, they're new muscles. These are things that we've never had to address as leaders. And so, yeah, that's what I'm enjoying.
Great, Nicole. Very well said. And I'll share my thoughts, Chris. Positives, greater efficiency, flexibility, personal time, bonding with family, working across levels, really we're going down to the lowermost guy and having a chat, guy or the girl there. I think the negative for me is two facets of the same thing. Nicole said too much of intensity at times. I can cope with it. I see many people crumbling under that. Second, I think isolation, it's manifesting in many ways, people being alone. But more importantly, it gives people an opportunity to escape from the truth at times. There are some times we have to be face to face and have that dialogue to iron it out. People can easily switch off their video and say, oh, sorry, the bandwidth connection went away. So that's leading to some sort of less development of younger professionals, especially. That brings me to the end of it. We are bang on time. Let me try to summarize this. And as Chris said, we could have easily gone in for half an hour more there, but I think it's way past Nicole's bedtime, and I'm sure many others have commitments there, and you guys have an agenda. But let me just summarize those in 30 seconds, or maybe I'll take 1 minute doing that. Technology redefining future of work and workplace. We had a fascinating discussion over the last 90 minutes around it, and we all agree that technology is redefining the future, and pandemic accelerated that entire thing. We are all reacting in many ways around to it, whether first is a human reaction, second, adopted agile ways of working, and then technology enabled that process. In adopting agile ways for the future, there were 8 themes which were important. I'm just summarizing the key points spoken by the eminent panelists. Agility starts with first with human reactions, understanding the emotions and reactions there, looking at multiple roles, multitasking. Third interesting point was flatter organization, direct access, not having hierarchies around it. There was the point around communication being important and empathy for all. Fifth point I wanted to talk about was operating models being ambidextrous was an important point if you want to embed agility. Communication, I talked about it. Sixth, seventh, I think Nicole raised an interesting point about agility into the infrastructure itself, thinking of the infrastructures also, and finally humans collaborating with technology and embracing it. Thank you all for listening into the conversation. I wanted to thank Shah, Nicole, Amrita for their wonderful comments. Wanted to thank IFTDO for inviting us for this panel discussion and sharing our views. It has been a pleasure interacting with you all. We are bang on time, or maybe 1 minute over. With that, back to you, Neha.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It was such a pleasure.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir. And it was a very interesting session indeed. An eye-opener was the Japanese experience of handling the COVID situation. It was very different from all the other countries, but as they say, we all coped up in our own ways. And the best thing that is that COVID at least has pushed all of us to talk about change in a very big way. So the transformation, the change, or the transition today is on our minds. L&D again plays a very important role, as everyone said, in enriching, enlightening, skill development, which eventually brings in agility. I'm very happy that Vinashil sir brought in the concept, the topic of millennials. So I come from that group and I represent my company's millennial workforce to the industry. So there were a few points which I also want to make in there. When ma'am said that everyone says that they're very, very impatient generation. We've also attended a lot of panel discussions on that, and we've spoken a lot about this. Impatient in the sense, I would again, taking COVID as an example, work from home was something that we have been talking, suggesting to the management since a long time. And it's an open organization. Everyone used to tell us that, come up with a policy, give us ideas, how can we go about it? COVID was one thing within a week's time. Within a week's time, that's
Yes.
what is something that, we can't digest, that we have been talking about it for the past 2 years or 3 years, but the management is capable of shifting gears just in a week. So when that impatience comes in, that's because we have witnessed that, we can go into that transition mode very quickly, but we take our time because maybe the situations are such that we can manage taking time. So the impatience for the millennials come in that sector, I think. And another thing that COVID brought in for the millennials was, someone said that they have, disengaged with the organization. I think I, as a representative, think absolutely opposite. I think we are more engaged with the organization because it was in the COVID times where the management realized that we were accessible even at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, even midnights for their any work, because a WhatsApp and we were awake, and there was no timelines because that was something that diminished during the COVID times. So we were available, and the trust factor on the millennials went up drastically. So, even now when we are back into offices, that trust still remains. So which is a very happy move for all of us, because the trust of the senior management has gone up on the millennials, and now we are considered, that any responsibility that will be bestowed upon us will be fulfilled. So I think we are more aligned to the corporation now, thanks to the work from home culture. So I just wanted to bring in these points. Any which ways all the panelists emphasize that technology and digitalization is to augment the HR and not substitute it. And we all, I'm sure, are glad that, we are still human, and we understand that it's important to understand and empathize with the current scenario and bring about a smooth transition. So thank you so much. Thank you everyone for joining us. And it's time for a short break. We have a very nice, interesting lineup ahead. I would request you all to stay with us, and we'll be back in a few minutes. Thank you so much.